tonight on NewsCenter. 13 North Koreans working in a restaurant in a foreign country defect to South Korea about a month after the international community slaps toughest-to-date sanctions on the North. Before heading off to work or on their way out of the country, Koreans exercise their right to vote on the first day of early voting for the 20th parliamentary election. And the reverberations from a leaked trove of Panama documents ripple through several nations, shaking one big name after another. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 9 a.m. in Washington, 2 p.m. in London, and 10 on a Friday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang NewsCenter. 13 North Koreans working at a restaurant abroad defected together to South Korea this week. That's what we're learning this evening. We have our Connie Kim joining us from the Unification Ministry in downtown Seoul. Connie, the South Korean government held an emergency press briefing a few hours ago.
Right, Kanyang. The news of North Korean workers defecting to South Korea was definitely a surprising one today. Now, South Korea's Unification Ministry said Friday that 1 male worker and 12 female employees have defected to the South on Thursday, with all of them in good condition. Now, the location of the restaurant where the defectors are said to have worked, as well as the route they took to arrive in South Korea, have not been revealed by Seoul's Unification Ministry, considering diplomatic relations with other countries and the possible risk these defected North Koreans could be identified or tracked down by the regime. But the ministry spokesperson did say the escapees may have been influenced by South Korean culture. Take a listen.
The North Korean employees have found out about the reality of South Korea through South Korean television, movies, and internet, and how unrealistic North Korean propaganda is. So they have decided to defect as a group.
South Korea said it has decided to accept all 13 defectors based on humanitarian grounds. This is the first time multiple North Koreans working in the same restaurant overseas defected together as a group.
Now, Connie, it's been roughly a month since UN sanctions were imposed. Is there a possibility that the defection is related to those sanctions, both from the United Nations and from other countries?
You're exactly right, Kanyang. South Korea says that these defected North Koreans felt extreme pressure to send back cash back to North Korea. Now, the UN sanctions imposed on the North were evaluated to be the strongest to date, and they're in essence aimed at cutting off funding for Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. With a handful of restrictions on its sources of income, it's highly likely the North ramped up pressure on its own people working abroad. Kim Jong-un is estimated to have been raking up some $10 million every year for some 130 North Korean restaurants operating in 12 countries. Now, this is a similar amount the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex earned annually. There have been speculations that Pyongyang is suffering from sanctions, and this incident clearly suggests that Pyongyang is feeling the consequences of its own actions. Back to you.
Thanks, Connie, for that. It looks like North Korea may be slapped with even more independent sanctions for its nuclear and missile provocations. A French official has revealed that Paris is also preparing ways to heap more pressure on that regime. Our Kwon So-wook gives us the updates.
While the international community works to implement the UN Security Council's unprecedented sanctions on North Korea for its nuclear and missile tests earlier this year, France is planning to impose its own additional restrictions against the regime, joining other countries like South Korea, the US, the UK, and Japan. This according to Emmanuel Lenin, an official at France's foreign ministry who spoke with the joint press corps of Seoul's foreign ministry in Paris earlier this week. Lenin said France's unilateral sanctions would include expanding travel bans, economic and financial sanctions. He said they would be similar in nature to those imposed by the UN Security Council, in which France is one of the 5 permanent members, and the European Union, which the diplomat says is expected to further expand its blacklist. He went on to say that the measures are a result of the concerns the French government, along with the EU, has regarding North Korea's threats, and that having diplomatic relations with North Korea does not provide reason to impose extra sanctions. This as France has no diplomatic ties with North Korea, unlike the majority of EU members. Meanwhile, the officials stressed that six-party talks on denuclearization appear impossible as Pyongyang has given no indication of relenting from its provocative acts. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Election time it is. It's now safe to say that the race has indeed begun. Day one of the two-day early voting period for the 20th parliamentary election. Voter turnout for today for the early voting session, more than 5%. Our political correspondent Park Ji-won reports.
Early voting took place on Friday with more than 3,500 polling stations across the country. First introduced in 2013 to raise the nation's voter turnout rate, this is the first time early voting has been applied to parliamentary elections.
You don't need to pre-register to cast your ballot during the early voting period. All you need to do is bring your ID card to any polling station nationwide.
After presenting a valid ID and have one's fingerprint scanned, voters receive their respective ballot papers and an envelope to put the ballot into it. Thanks to this convenience, many citizens with busy schedules next week chose to vote during the early voting period.
Since I won't be able to vote on Election Day, I decided to exercise my precious voting right today. It was very simple because all I needed was my ID card.
Over in Seoul Station, a polling station has also been set up for the first time for train commuters.
I'm on my way to a business trip, and as I have another business trip on the day of the election, I decided to vote today.
Famous celebrities, including Seolhyun from K-pop group AOA, and who was appointed an honorary ambassador for the election, also exercised their voting rights to encourage more people to vote.
A lot of manpower and budget have been invested for the two-day early voting. We wish many voters participate in the process so that all these efforts bear fruit.
The turnout on Friday resulted in over 2.2 million people exercising their voting rights, or 5.45% of total eligible voters. The nation's southwestern Jeollanam-do province drew in the highest percentage at over 9%, while the southern port city of Busan saw the lowest percentage of voters at 4.4%. Friday's voter turnout was higher than the first day of early voting in 2014 local elections, when 11.5% of voters showed up during early voting period. As the nation's early voting participation rate has been keep increasing, the National Election Commission expects to achieve its goal of 14% by the end of Saturday. The early voting will run again from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, we sent another reporter, our Kim Ji-yeon, to where polling stations have been installed for the first time ever in Incheon International Airport. Take a look.
It's the first time ever Korea has set up a polling station at its main gateway, Incheon International Airport, where around 45 million people fly in or out of the country every year. I know I'm going to be busy on April 13th covering the general election, so I've decided to check out the early voting myself.
I wasn't planning to vote today, but no worries, I just showed my driver's license and it took me a total of 5 minutes, including waiting in line to cast my ballot. After that, it was so convenient and I felt a sense of relief and pride to carry out my civic rights.
And I wasn't the only one to feel that way.
I might not have the time to vote on Election Day because I'm working, so I'm relieved I had the chance to cast my ballot at an early voting station.
I was going to cast my ballot at home before I left for vacation, but I heard that I could vote here, so that's what I did.
It takes less than 20 minutes to vote in the early voting station at the Incheon International Airport. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Incheon.
Now, when Koreans head to the polls on April 13th, they will get two ballots, one for a district representative and another for a party. Now, the latter will determine how many proportional representatives each party will get in the National Assembly. Our Shin Se-min has a breakdown of how things are looking for the parties this year.
A total of 300 lawmakers will be elected, with 253 of them selected through constituency elections and the remaining 47 allocated through proportional representation. Proportional representatives are awarded to the parties based on the number of votes they get. But to be eligible, a party has to get more than 3% of the vote, or more than 5 of its candidates have to be elected. This year, there are 21 parties running, resulting in one of the longest ballots ever printed. The 158 candidates in contention for proportional representative seats generally have not held office before, but come from a wide variety of backgrounds and reflect a party's vision. They have been nominated and ranked by the party, with the higher numbers given priority once the number of seats has been determined. The ruling Saenuri Party currently has the most proportional representatives, with 27, and the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has 20. And the previously collected polling data shows that those numbers aren't likely to change much after the upcoming election. Polling company Realmeter made some predictions of how many proportional representatives each party will get based on the party's approval ratings in the week of March 28th to 30th. Its projections show the ruling Saenuri Party garnering 20 seats based on its approval rating of 37.7%, the Minju Party getting 14 with its 25.2% approval rating, the People's Party getting 8, and the Justice Party 5. A similar survey done by Gallup based on ratings from March 29th to 31st projects a similar outcome, with Saenuri Party taking 23 seats, the Minju Party getting 13, the People's Party 8, and the Justice Party 3. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
So the 20th National Assembly election just 5 days away, key battlegrounds heating up to be neck-and-neck races. The outcome is increasingly just too hard to tell. Well, the outcome also closely watched by many, as it could serve as a barometer for the presidential election next year. Let's try to take a pulse. Park Tae-woo, research professor at the Institute of Sustainable Development at Korea University, joins us live in the studio. Professor Park, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
And now the two-day early voting period kicked off today. This is the very first time that early voting has been implemented in a parliamentary election.
Right.
Now, many of us are looking to the early voter turnout and the results there to serve as a litmus test for the final outcome on Wednesday.
That's right. In the past, since we adopted this system, the voting turnout rate, I think, from 4% to 19%, depending on the election. But first have introduction to general elections, and this time, even today, one day, early voting, about 5%, voters turnout. Then, if tomorrow more people visit there, it is expected that 15%, something like that. Probably, National Election Commission predict that we are going to have around 60%, voters turnout in general after 13th general election. But if you look back into 16th National Assembly, the total voters turnout about 57%, about 19th Assembly about 54%, something like that. So this time, because of today's early voting system, the general turnout will be higher than the past general elections, I think.
Right, because we have 2 more days of voting.
Right.
Can we expect this newly adopted system to boost voter turnout? And you said that was the case.
That's right. This time, National Election Commission set up about 3,511 polling stations in the major stations, in the even airport. It means that those voters could have more chances, to go to polling stations if they are very busy on the very day, 13th April. Also, since we adopted this system in the 2014, I think, all the voters who are interested in going to polling station have more chances and more, I think, some opinion polls could be more reflected on a fair ground, because 2 more days than just 1 day, election day. So this is a very nice system for the general turnout, I think.
Sure. Now, candidates and political parties, this weekend is their final weekend before Election Day. And of course, some speculate that how they do over the weekend this time around, and they are focusing their efforts in the Seoul metropolitan area. How they do this weekend will decide who will be cheering and who will be in tears Election Day.
That's right. Out of those 253 local districts, in the Seoul and the metropolitan areas, there are about 122 local districts. So it means that the Seoul metropolitan areas, including Gyeonggi province, will be such a very important region for the parties to be contesting for more seats in the National Assembly. Also, the surging popularity of the People's Party is a very important variable, including how much percentage the undecided voters will be turn out in the future, something like that. So I think, even in the Seoul and the metropolitan areas, about 67 districts are too close to call even as of now. It means that all the parties will focus on campaigning strategically on the Seoul metropolitan areas in the future.
The big question is, what will be the key deciding factor this time around for the 20th general election? Will it be the swing voters, undecided voters?
That's right. It is estimated that as of now, many opinion polls and surveys, from 24% to 40%, undecided voters are detected out of, opinion polls. It means that usually the voting numbers are calculated on generation basis when we analyze the voting tendencies. Over 60s, this time, about 9 million, more than 9 million people are occupying the total voting population. It means that about 23%. So how many people will be going to polling station in the over 60s is very important. Also, I think next issue is that if any parties make any radical policy commitment again, because we don't have any issue-taking major issues now in this election. Also, again, will the voters will be resorting to regionalism again, to Yeongnam, Honam, something like that? And so how many youngsters in their 20s and 30s will go to polling station? This is another question. So we have 3 more days, and if there is one more important variable, will the President Park Geun-hye, with a supporting rate of around 40%, will she make any messages to the people? This is one of the variables, I think, also.
Well, a lot of variables for this election. Park Dae-woo Research Professor, Korea University, thank you indeed for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you.
After a recent trip to North America, President Park Geun-hye got back to the task of revitalizing the nation's economy. Now, she traveled outside the capital to 2 regional innovation centers. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun has more on the president's follow-up on progress they made over the past year.
Continuing her checkup on recently established creative economy innovation centers, the president visited the branch in Korea's central Chungcheongbuk-do province, a center which specializes in the bio and beauty sectors.
팩 종류가 엄청 많잖아요. 네네. 근데 이 탄소 마스크는 어떤 특징이 있나요?
It has amazing moisturizing and brightening properties, and is also effective to reduce wrinkles.
In addition to hearing about the center's progress over the past year, President Park also attended the launch of employment zones at the center, which opened in all 17 innovation centers as of the end of last month. It's anticipated that the recruiting centers will create 2,500 new jobs by matching job seekers with startups in the innovation centers and provide training programs for 10,000 employees. She then visited the Jeollabuk-do branch, specializing in agriculture and carbon fiber. The 2 centers so far have supported the launch and production of over 100 startups and small companies, respectively.
어떻게 보면 여러분들이 이렇게 그 창조 경제의 어떤 선구자 같이 그 역사를 지금 써나가고 있다 이렇게 생각을 하시면 틀림없을 것 같아요.
Startups that were fostered at innovation centers are now expanding overseas,
debuting at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and sealing contracts at business events held during the president's latest visit to U.S. and Mexico. President Park has encouraged participating companies to be ambitious and set their sights on the global market. 송지선, Arirang News.
In its monthly report on the national economy known as the Green Book, the government says the Korea's economy seems to be slowly rebounding from a protracted slump as recent economic indicators point to signs of recovery. But will it be able to maintain this momentum? Kim Min-ji has the details.
The Korean economy is showing signs of recovery. That's the assessment by the country's finance ministry, which says the economy is rebounding slowly from a slump earlier in the year. Recent data show that industrial output rose over 3% on month in February, marking the highest jump in over 6 years. This is mainly due to an uptick in demand for semiconductors as Korea's tech giants release new smartphones. Card spending, which indicate retail sales, also posted a double-digit growth rate. Transactions amounted to $45 billion in February, which is up more than 12% on year. As for exports, the ministry noted that despite another fall in March, the pace of decline has significantly slowed. Outbound shipments slid over 8% last month after posting double-digit drops for the past 3 months. However, the finance ministry said that external risks such as a global economic slowdown could weigh on the local economy. The ministry vowed to carry out economic tasks, including structural reform and job creation, to facilitate solid economic recovery. But according to experts, it may be too early to say that the economy is rebounding.
Data indicating recovery for 1 or 2 months is not enough to say that the rebound will continue. Improvement of external conditions is a prerequisite. However, that's not the case now, so it's too early to say whether the economy will improve or not.
Experts add that the government will also have to maintain its stimulus measures, as a recent uptick in domestic demand was a result of such efforts. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Some of the world's political elite continues to defend themselves over details of potentially illicit offshore accounts that were discovered in the world's biggest data leak ever, known as the Panama Papers. For the latest development resulting from the fallout, we turn to Kwon Jang-ho.
After Iceland's Prime Minister stepped down on Tuesday, several other world leaders are finding themselves in an uncomfortable position after details of their offshore accounts emerged from the so-called Panama Papers leak. In Argentina, state prosecutors have asked a judge to open an investigation into President Mauricio Macri's involvement in offshore companies.
I want to say to you all one more time that I am very calm, that I have complied with the law, I have told the truth, and that I have nothing to hide.
Over in the UK, Prime Minister David Cameron, after 3 days of probing questions by the press and the public, finally admitted that he had profited from his father's offshore trust.
We owned 5,000 units in Blairmore Investment Trust, which we sold in January 2010.
Was there a profit on it?
I paid income tax on the dividends, but there was a profit on it, but it was less than the capital gains tax allowance, so I didn't pay capital gains tax, but it was subject to all the UK taxes in all the normal way.
Meanwhile, Russia's President Vladimir Putin claimed that the accusations against him and his associates were a conspiracy to destabilize the country. And the Chinese government also took steps to censor all content regarding the Panama Papers from the internet, after foreign press revealed several family members of the country's leadership were named in the documents. Some of the most powerful political figures in the world have been rattled, and it remains to be seen how many more will be shaken as more details emerge from the documents. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Donald Trump's lead in the U.S. Republican primaries is shrinking, and so is his popularity. According to a new poll, 7 out of 10 Americans dislike the Donald. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, should this come as a surprise?
Kanyang, I think a lot of people are wondering why Trump's support hasn't fallen off a lot sooner. He's offended just about everyone he could. We're talking about people of all genders, races, religions, political views, you name it. But still, we take a look, he's leading the delegate count heading into the very important New York primary.
So, Bruce, why is it now that he has become the least liked candidate on the campaign trail?
Yeah, among all the candidates, both parties. Likely a series of controversies lately, things he's gotten himself involved in. For one, there was a claim he made that women should be punished for having abortions. Then he threatened and insulted the wife of Republican presidential rival Texas Senator Ted Cruz as an unsavory move many conservatives frowned upon. And he also defended one of his campaign managers who was charged with battery against a female reporter. Now, according to the Associated Press GFK poll, Trump's unpopularity climbed from 58% in mid-February to 69% this week. For comparison, Cruz had a rating of 59% and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton 55%. Trump leads Cruz by more than 200 delegates, and he still has a massive lead in New York, and a big win could draw him much closer to the party nomination. But according to the AP, the sheer breadth of his unpopularity raises questions how he could win the support needed to challenge Democrats in the presidential election to take place this November. Belgian police are asking the public to help them find a suspect in the Brussels terror attacks, now widely known as the Man in the Hat. Authorities say he was seen arriving at the Brussels airport with 2 suicide bombers and leaving alongside passengers after 2 bombs exploded.
We especially appeal to people who might have filmed or taken a photograph of the suspect or link. They can provide extra information on this issue. Are requested to call the telephone numbers, which will be shown on the site, or the email addresses.
Prosecutors say they've also been able to track his escape route immediately after the bombings.
Bruce, so the police are appealing for the public's help. Now, is that a sign that their investigations have hit a wall?
Kanyang, it could be. I mean, right now they're only able to describe the suspect as a man in a hat, so seemingly they have little else to go on. And another possible reason to push for help right now, they believe the suspect may have information about other terrorist cells.
So potential knowledge that could prevent another tragedy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much for your coverage tonight and all of this week. We'll see you next week.
All right, thanks.
Arirang TV in southern Seoul.
This is where I spend most of the day, the Arirang TV newsroom. We work alongside other international broadcasters like the ones you see right behind me. Since cutting the ribbon in 1996, Arirang has been with you for the last 20 years as Korea's one and only global network. And marking the anniversary, we decided to take a look at the international broadcasting service sector around the world.
Voice of America, Deutsche Welle, France 24, CCTV, Russia Today, and Arirang TV. There are some exemplars of state-funded international broadcasters or public international broadcasters in top 10 broadcasting nations. Created in the early 20th century for ways to keep their colonial outposts in touch with metropolitan views, international broadcasting went through a transformation during the war and over its 80-year history has evolved in style, presentation, and rationale.
So I see international broadcasting historically as having been this really important way in which countries have been able to speak across frontiers directly to ordinary people around the world. I think it's been a really important way in which public diplomacy has been conducted.
Today, it's used by developed and emerging economies to promote their cultures, perspectives, and improving national image, among others. Eric Kremer is Vice President of Distribution for France 24, one of the most solid public international broadcasters in the world. I sat down with him during his recent visit to Arirang TV.
We are state-owned, so most of our resources come from the taxes of the citizen. Our role is to provide international news channel about the most important issues of this world. I would say we like to provide a French perspective on this. It doesn't mean a government perspective, it's a French perspective.
As a leading executive of France's public broadcaster,
Crimea feels that it's only appropriate that Korea too has a well-functioning international broadcaster.
I think Korea is a big country, has a strong history, a strong culture, is one of the most advanced developed nations in Asia. So first of all, it's very normal that Korea have an international channel. Arirang is not a news channel like we are, but tend to promote Korean culture and does it well.
In fact, France 24 is the latecomer of the two in the game. Korea recognized the need for an international broadcaster early on, making entry into international TV broadcasting with the launch of Arirang in 1996, at most 10 years earlier than its counterparts in France, China, and Russia. Major broadcasting nations have invested heavily in international broadcasting over the last 15 years. Generously funded and legislatively supported new entrants such as China's CCTV and Russia's RT, which have achieved strong footholds, continuously grow in size, in reach, in global influence. Their legislative arrangements, formal missions, goals, and journalistic independence are written into the law in their respective countries, with the exception of Korea. Arirang has no underpinning legislation and is classified as a non-profit foundation under the Korean Civil Code, despite being one of the pioneers of public international broadcasting in the English language. So what prompts these governments to provide legal grounds and spend annually hundreds of millions of dollars on their country's international broadcasters? Christopher Springate is a longtime reporter, anchor, and producer of DW News.
DW is kind of like Germany's visiting card, global visiting card, that we can, we have a global reach. We talk to the world, and that's a very good way. German politics, of course, the German government is also deeply committed to those values that I was talking about, democratic values, pluralistic values. We can open doors for some of those aspects of German policy.
For the last 20 years, Arirang has been the single provider of public international broadcasting service in Korea under the motto, bringing Korea to the world to Korea.
A special legislation for an international broadcaster guarantees stable funding for its operations. By writing it into law, the government, out of state necessity, can designate a broadcaster as its official media outlet, bound with the mission of delivering various Korea-related issues to viewers around the world. In order for the broadcaster to appropriately carry out that public role, financial resources should be fully sponsored by the state based on a special law.
And for the next 20, 30 years, the world on Arirang, you bet. Well, it is a nice Friday in this April, but a very dusty one today. For more on that and the weather outlook for this weekend, let's go straight over to our weather center. Jihan, really, this cannot be right. A fine dust advisory was issued in the capital area this afternoon.
Yes, the advisory was issued at 3 p.m. in Seoul and the surrounding areas, but it lifted as of 6 p.m. this evening. And except for Jeju Island, the rest of the country will have a dusty Saturday tomorrow. And on Sunday, the capital area will be blanketed by fine dust. So if you plan to be outdoors this weekend, especially on Saturday, be sure to have a face mask ready. And without doubt, a lot of you will be traveling to enjoy spring flower festivals. About more than 4.7 million vehicles should hit the roads, meaning that traffic on the highways will be quite congested, peaking between 11 a.m. and noon on Saturday and between 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. But temperatures will continue to be generous. Readings will remain on the mild side over the weekend under partly sunny skies, and similar weather pattern will carry on next week. And on to tomorrow's temperature readings. Daily low here in Seoul will kick off at 8 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju will get up to 13 and 11. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will be topping out at 18, while Busan and Jeju should see a high of 22 and 20. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for staying with us. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you right back here same time Monday on NewsCenter.
Thank you.